Welcome to everyone out there and everyone in here. Welcome to Elivinghope Online. We're glad that you're here with us tonight. Let's go around the table real quick and say who all we are.
Oh, I'm starting?
You're
Hi,
starting.
I'm Morgan.
Hi, Charlene.
I'm Carrie.
I'm Justin.
And I'm Susan.
And if you've noticed, normally there's a gentleman sitting in the seat with a big beard and no hair. Big beard, and he is not here tonight. So he's having me lead tonight. My name's Carrie again. We're glad that you all are here. This is season 2 of Elivinghope Online. Last season, we did something completely different where we just talked about, different topics each week. But this time we've been sort of focusing, drilling in on one topic, and that is love. And so 2 weeks ago, we talked about who God loves. Last week, we talked about where God loves. And this week, we're talking about when God loves. Now, the easy answer is, who does God love? What's the easy answer that we came up with?
Everyone.
Just everybody.
Everyone.
Yep.
When we talked last week about where does God love, what was the easy answer? I think it was everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And so then this week, it's when does God love? What's the answer?
All the time.
All the time, always. But sometimes it doesn't always feel like that. Sometimes it's hard to feel the love of God and feel the love of the people around us. And this is going to be a heavy topic tonight. Normally, we'd start out with some fun stuff and some jokey stuff, and I couldn't figure that out with this one because we're going to go deep pretty quick. We're talking about when does God love, and it's the thing that we wanted to focus on this week. And we talked about this months ago when we sat down. A bunch of us sat down and talked about what we're going to deal with this topic and how we're going to answer this question of when does God love. And one of the things that we came up with was that God loves us during the times when we may not even feel loved or lovable, or when we feel alone, and it's harder to feel His presence and it's harder to feel loved. And that's probably when He loves us the most and we don't ever feel it, and it's in those times of depression. And so we're hitting the heavy stuff tonight. But sometimes these topics are really a big deal. In fact, the beginning of this month, October 6th through the 12th, was Mental Health Awareness Week. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that I've been seeing posts of online and Facebook and everyone talking about it. And let your loved ones know you love them and all of these things. So we're going to talk about that tonight. So my first question that I want to throw out to the team here is, has there ever been a time when you felt unloved or unlovable, or when you felt alone, even in a room full of people? And that's kind of what my story is, and I'll share mine real quick, an instance of mine, while you guys think of your stories. But my answer to that question is, when did I ever feel alone, or when did I ever feel unloved? It was about 17 or 18 years ago, and I remember this specifically, an ending to a really bad relationship, a really long relationship. And it was the Saturday before Thanksgiving that the end of that 5-year relationship happened. So on Thanksgiving Day, it's Thursday, I'm getting ready to go to my family. I don't know why I went to family Thanksgiving that day. What I should have done was just stayed home in my sweatpants, watched the parade, and ate leftover Chinese food. That would have been a great day for me on that year. But for some reason, I went to my family gathering, and my parents went ahead of me, and so they got there first, and they told everybody, they said, all right, don't ask her if so-and-so's coming, because he's not, and it's bad, it's all bad. Just don't talk to her about it. So I went to my family gathering, and I don't know if people were so afraid to talk to me at all, but I was just sitting there, and, part of me was not really wanting to be there, and part of me was just wanting to be by myself. But I sat in that room, and it's like, if you don't know what to say, then they just avoid and don't make eye contact. And so I was in a room full of 30 people and had no idea. It just felt weird because I felt like I was in a room all by myself in a room full of 30 people. Mm. But it's because they didn't know what to say, or they were trying not to hurt my feelings. And that's the love of my family at that time, was not to say anything. And when we do talk, sometimes we don't end up helping the situation for someone else. But I felt really alone in that instance because I was in a room full of people. It was the strangest feeling in the world to me. Do any of you all have any of those stories where you felt alone or unloved?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I felt like this multiple times throughout my life, but I think the worst one was when I was in college, and that's a very, trying time sometimes because sometimes you are away from the people that you love, and when you're by yourself, and I'd broken up with somebody, and my roommate and I had this disagreement, and just everything just kept piling on, and you just feel like you're trying to do the right things, or you're trying to do what you're supposed to do, and you're just unloved, or unlovable was probably more, or unworthy of love, or you're just not doing anything right, and it was a very, very dark time, and I cried, and I probably took a few more pills than I should have, and just that utter sense of I don't even know how to describe it. It's depression, right? But it's just this bottomless pit that you feel like you maybe are at the bottom, but it's so far down you don't think you can come back up from. And there are other times too, though, that I've felt that deep darkness, even when I've had great, I've had a great family. I have a great family. I have a good job. I have, great friends and a great church. And there are just some days when it just eats at you, and you just feel like that. And it's like, where are you? And why do I feel like this? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any of those stories?
I think I believe that I make I don't know how to say this, because I don't open up and share a lot of things with people. And so I kind of feel like I'm alone all the time. But it's like I've brought it on myself. It's not, anything that God does, because God's always there, but I just tend to keep things to myself and don't ask for help, and so it's, I do it to myself. So I've pretty much felt, alone most of my life, which I haven't been alone. But like I said, that's in my own head and of my own doing. So I know He's always there.
Yeah, I think for me, just really any time, and I'll be honest, I don't know that I've ever experienced something that I felt like was super long-lasting overall, like for weeks or anything at a time. But I think that I have quicker hits of that, and I think those usually come when I feel like I haven't met whatever expectation I have of myself. So if I've fallen short of what I expect of myself, and just haven't been good enough, whatever that means, right. That I had in my mind, or that I know that I've let people down that are close to me, or that care about me, or things like that. I think it's easy for me to just kind of go into my own head about that and feel very much like I'm alone.
And when you do that, do you feel like you isolate yourself, kind of, because you're even from God, you isolate yourself, and you don't feel even worthy enough to read the Bible or whatever, so you kind of back away from Him.
Yeah, and not to downplay it, but it's a little bit like a pity party,
yeah,
right?
And that's
where
what
I'm
is,
oh, it's so sad for me, and I'm in this rough spot, and how hard is that? And not that those feelings and everything that I'm going through isn't legitimate or anything, but it's easy to go into that place and just want to be sad, as opposed to engage with the people that I felt like I let down, or that it will actually help me,
or the people who would actually help you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you find it hard to share when you feel that way? Is it harder for you to share?
I feel guilty.
You feel guilty sharing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Where does that come from?
Well, because you think people are going to think, well, what's wrong with them people?
Yeah, it's I have a great life compared to so many people that are very, very needy. It's what am I complaining about?
Right.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
We beat ourselves up.
I did find out the other day something about myself I figured out. I try, whenever I do want to share with someone, whenever I do want to get it outside of my head, first of all, it takes me a long time to get there. But secondly, I almost feel like I have to come to the conversation with already a finished thought process.
Yeah, you rehearsed it.
I've rehearsed it. And not just that, I've already, they say, something's broken, fix it. If you see something that's broken, try to fix it. I try to fix it before I get to that point of actually sharing it with someone. Because I'm like, okay, I can't just open up and fall apart in front of someone without
You have to have had a plan.
without having a plan.
Oh, yeah.
Why do we feel like we have to have a plan for this all the time?
I think it's just because of maybe the fear of people not accepting you when you break apart. Just
Weakness,
It feels like weakness.
showing weakness.
And so we're worried that they're going to see us as weak.
It's vulnerability.
Well, and you got to think there's a lot of times in life when you do show vulnerability, or you have shown somebody something that's really in there, and they have let you down, or
And then you just build those
and
walls
then you
right
build
back
that up even more. So every time it gets a little bit harder to let somebody see that.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. So, but you were mentioned that you've been in those times when you felt like you were at the bottom at the bottom. I can understand why it's a little hard for a lot of people to feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and then terrible things can happen at that point when you don't feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Or you think the light's a train.
Or you think the light is a train coming to hit you. Yeah, I totally get that too. I never even thought about that, but that's true.
Now you will.
Now
Next
I
time.
will.
Thanks,
Next
Susan.
Time, thanks,
Now-
Susan. Next time I see a
now
light,
you
I'm going
give
to
her
go.
another fear.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. So
It is not a train. It is not a train.
Yeah, it's fine.
Unless you're on a railroad track, then don't go there.
don't go.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. I feel like it's taboo. It's that
It is
conversation that we're not allowed to have. And it's not, sometimes I worry that it's heavier, and for those of you who aren't necessarily in church community, for those of you who might not come to church on a regular basis, and for those of you who do, who are in church and who are Christians, sometimes it feels like in church it's a taboo conversation to have.
Well, because you're a Christian.
Right.
You should not have any problems. What are you
Right.
talking about?
I heard someone say once, well, Christians shouldn't have depression.
Well, no. Sure.
Wow, yeah.
I've heard people say that, and I just wanted to say it's illness.
Depression doesn't discriminate.
Yeah,
No.
it doesn't.
Yeah.
And to say that a Christian shouldn't go through depression is like saying that a Christian can't get some other illness, and at least that's what I thought in my head. I didn't say it out loud. I really wished I had. But I feel like it's such a taboo conversation to have that you have to have these awareness weeks and these awareness months in order to, say, hey, it's okay to fall apart. For some reason, we don't know that it's okay to fall apart. I saw a meme the other day that said, tacos fall apart and we love tacos. So
True.
Well, and I think one of the worst things that we do as Christians is somebody will tell us their story, and then we say, oh, well, God has a plan.
Everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens for a reason. God has a plan.
You know what's interesting about that too, and I was just as you're saying that is, so I haven't formed this thought completely, but here we go.
We love these times.
I know, is as much as we are apprehensive to share ourselves, or anybody, just everybody's apprehensive to share, really more often than not, out of fear or out of what will people think or how will that be received or whatever else. So, but by not sharing, what we've also done is create a whole group of people right now in our society, I think, that when somebody does get the guts to share, it's so not normal that we're not used to, or we haven't had enough experience with it. Not that it's not normal, but it's not what we experience a lot, is people really sharing and really asking for support or help in whatever specific way. And so then all of a sudden, it's a completely new experience for whoever is getting shared to. And so then they don't know how to react. And in a church, how easy is it to say, well, then I'll pray for you, and then you walk away because it's awkward or whatever, instead of sitting with somebody in the crappiness of whatever their situation is and saying, man, that's really hard. I don't know, I wish I had an answer for you. Yeah, I'd love to have an answer for you. I don't, but man, talk to me more about that, or say something else about that, or here's a time that it was terrible for me, or whatever else. But
Well, and I really think there's a time when it was terrible for me, and I think, and I've learned, I hope, that sometimes when we go through some of the things that we go through, it's really to equip us so that we can respond to folks like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's still not fun.
Pastor John, who is online right now because he's at home.
Hi, John.
Hi, John. He said that secrets can isolate us. You know, and one of the things I've heard somebody say before is that we're only as sick as our secrets.
Yep.
I heard someone say that we're only as sick as our secrets. I think that when we were able to get them out and we feel a safe place to get them out, then we can start to heal that kind of thing. Because sometimes the worst place I could be
Is in your head.
is in my head.
Oh, yeah.
And if we leave them there,
Well, they grow.
yes, even bigger and bigger and,
And bigger and bigger, yes.
And heavier and heavier. And we're
Yep.
meant to yoke with one another and to share those burdens and to carry each other's burdens so that it isn't so heavy.
Right.
Yeah. But if you notice, it was funny because I read on Facebook today, and you know it's true because it was on Facebook, of course, that there is how was it phrased? The F-bomb of Christians is that we walk into a church and your house could be burning down, your whole life is in shambles, and somebody walks up and says, "How are you today?" "Fine."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
That's true. That's an F word.
Yeah.
That's
That
the
is an
F-bomb
F-word.
in
That's
church.
An F-bomb in church.
Fine.
Because sometimes fine is not fine.
No.
Oh, oftentimes fine is not fine.
Fine is definitely not fine.
No.
Yes.
There's a training session for coaches that I've been through before that they say, you go up to someone and say, "How are you?" If they say fine, you say, "No, how are you really?" And then on the flip side of that, though, is I know from my own experience, I have to give someone permission to ask me how I am really. You know, it's almost like I don't want everybody in the church asking me, "Well, how are you really?" You know, I don't know if it's this fear I have of oversharing or this fear I have of losing control of the narrative of who I am. It might be that. Because if the more my story that gets out there, the more people have control of the narrative of my life.
It's interesting. How much of that do you think, and not just because I know Enneagram, whatever, but like how much do you think that is personality? Because even as you were describing that, my thought was, well, I don't want everybody coming up and asking me, partly because of, my goodness, how much time would that take me to actually explain how I'm doing
True.
to 44
Everybody.
people,
Yeah.
you know, like, or even 8 people. I mean, I don't have time for that. Is what I was thinking in my mind. But I'm very much like a time, energy kind
You
of
are a
person,
time, energy
and so it's interesting that.
And I don't want people asking me because then you're going to use it against me later.
That's
Yeah,
your
interesting.
fear. That's
Interesting.
part of your
So-
personality trait. For those of you who've never heard of the Enneagram before, it's a great tool for spiritual growth and just understanding who you are and how God made you and how you interact with the world. But so if you haven't looked it up, look it up. But it's a great thing. For me, I think that I don't know if that must be part of. I think part of that too for me is that I don't like confrontation, and so anytime I share something that's not pretty princess, balloons and unicorns and rainbows, I feel like I'm causing conflict in somebody else's life.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
causing
yes.
a hardship on
Then
someone.
we become a burden on others, and we don't want to do that. So we remove ourselves from
Yes.
that, and we build more walls, and we don't talk to people. And I may have been there before.
I didn't say it was good. I didn't say it was
Which
right.
is funny because Jesus says, "Come to me,
Yes.
come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden."
And if we are supposed to be Christ to the world, we should be telling
We
everyone
should
that.
be telling everybody.
But we also need to follow what Jesus did, because self-care is important.
Yes.
And he did withdraw to
And he
places,
did.
and he had some
Because he
alone
drew
time.
from his Father to get,
Yeah.
and we do too.
Yes.
Yes.
Spiritual growth is important.
Oh, so much so.
I've learned that in myself, that when I'm worst in my head is when I'm worse at
Spiritual
spiritual
stuff.
stuff. If I've had too much work to do, or even homework in my ministry classes, but haven't had personal growth time with God, personal time with God, my brain is not a good place. So I think that no matter what, our relationship with God mirrors our relationship and how we're healthy in ourselves and with each other. That's just a little spiritual thing there at the side. But yeah, I think that the church should be one of the places, I've said this before and I'll say it a million times before here and I'm gone. But the church should be the one place where we could, upon all the other places, but it should definitely be a place where you can come to be fully open about who you are and be loved, regardless of what what anybody might think. I feel like the church is the one place where you should open arms, because that's how Jesus took us in.
But sadly, I don't think we've been that.
No, a lot of people feel ostracized or
I really feel like
feel welcome.
as the church as a whole, we have not been a beacon of come in, I love you as you are. I don't know why that is, but
I think there's interesting reasons partly behind that, but I think if you go back way long time, get like history-wise on you, but like even more recently, even if you look at this particular denomination of church, like there is very much built under the idea that, hey, let's go really specifically seek out people that are in really dark places. So it was really low, a lot of people that were in like prostitutes or addicted to various things and all kinds of things that are a little bit more extreme. And as those people were loved and felt loved and slowly as God helped them change, what was interesting is that then they go on to have kids or their families that they don't want those people to make the same mistakes. And so then how do you make sure that somebody doesn't make the same mistake as you? Well, you put a rule in place, right?
Yep.
And if you put a rule in place, then they'll just follow that rule. And we're so bad about that. And I'm sure we're doing the same thing now in some way, shape, or form. And in
I think
100 years, somebody will tell us.
Yeah, I think we've gotten better about a lot of those rules.
I do too.
If you look at the history of a lot of the churches, especially this denomination, 50 years ago, you weren't allowed to go to a movie theater.
Right.
You weren't allowed to go see a movie
dance.
or dance. Yeah. And now they've got dance classes in Nazarene universities. We're learning and we're growing and we're changing, and it's when we stop allowing that to happen that we start to go stale, I think. And that's when rules become our mainstay instead of relationship.
Right.
Rules instead of relationship.
Because that's
very
it. It's all about relationship.
Yes, it is. It definitely is. And it's how we handle ourselves in relationship, I think. When I was in high school, another part of my personality issues is I don't like to make decisions. I am terrible about them. Please, someone else run my life for me. And so in high school, I did not want to make the decision of where to go to college, and I was having a really bad time of it, and I just went through it terribly. And my friend, or a friend of my mother, had just lost her husband not too long before that, and she says, Carrie, when I went through the depression of losing my husband, she goes, here's what I did. I read the book of Job. Now, that's you understand why that's funny. If you're a Christian, you've read the book of Job. It's funny.
It's not a happy book.
It's not a happy book. To think, I know. To think in the midst of depression, you read a book about massive depression in the Bible, terrible things that can happen to someone. So I read through Job here again recently in the effort of talking about this, and I'm like, man, anybody who's in depression, how did this help? But I remember it helped me back then. It does help.
Because you got to get to the end.
You got to get to the end. You got to get to the end of the book, and it's not a short book. It's pretty long, but it's still a really interesting book. And at the end of the second chapter, so it's still early on in the book, Job is having a really hard time. He's had his first trial. He lost his children. He lost all of his possessions. They've all died, been destroyed, stolen. And he's just in a terrible state. And 3 of his friends come to see him. It's coming. 3 of his friends come to see him. And when they walk up on him, before they get all the way to him, they don't even recognize who he is. He had changed his...
Covered in dust.
Huh?
Dust.
covered in
boils.
dust. He'd ripped his hair out. His clothes were torn. He was in such an emotional state of terrible that it came out on the outside. They didn't even recognize him anymore. And I think that in our world today, we can sort of look at people and go, something's going on with them. What's going on with them? We need to check on them. And so whenever you see that, please do that. But they came up to him and they got so frustrated with how, or not frustrated at him, but frustrated for him. They're like, they start to see and they start to feel the pain. And so then they rip their clothes and they just sit with him. They just sit in the dirt with him. And it said, the scripture I read in the version I read, it said because they didn't know what to say. And I'm like, good job, boys. If you don't know what to say, don't talk. By the end of the book,
They had started talking.
they had started talking and
Maybe
shouldn't have.
Shouldn't have.
Should
Yes.
not have talked, because all three of them were just all wrong on how they were portraying God to Job in the midst of his terribleness. And by the end of the book, not to give it away, spoiler alert, I don't know if it's a spoiler alert. I don't know. For some people, it might be a spoiler alert. God, restores him. There's light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is God. And God was with him the whole way through it, but, he had to go through these trials, and he saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and he came out the other side. But even through that, every time he talked about God in the entire book, Job was right in how he was describing who God was, and the three friends were wrong. In the midst of his brokenness, he saw God clearer than his three friends did. And so sometimes we can't impose our belief of what God's going to do. We can't say, God has a plan. God, nothing happens that's not without God. What's the other phrase you used?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens
Yes.
for a reason. That's us projecting upon them when sometimes in the midst of their darkness, if you just let them talk, they might teach you a thing or two. So about God and about life, and sometimes they just need someone to listen to them. I know that in my darkness, in times that I've been scared or hurt, it's just getting it outside of my head. But then when someone tries to come back at me, has that ever happened to you guys where you've shared and then they've said specifically, well, God has a plan, or said something that you were like,
Well, I
that
think
was not helpful at all.
I think people want to fix stuff naturally, right? I mean, people, and with good intentions, people are very nice a lot of times. A lot of people are jerks, but a lot of times people are nice. Yeah, and those people that are really your friends and that really do want to help, I think by and large, the response initially is, hey, there's this terrible thing going on with my friend. What can I do to help? And help isn't, we don't see help as just being around. We see help as, okay, then let me give you advice, or let me fix this problem for you. And it's different when we start talking about like ourselves, right? It's a little bit different than like the washing machine that's broken.
Yeah.
Like you can't just go like, oh, I can go help you fix that. Like it's not always as easy as just going and helping somebody fix that. But I think being willing, like we said earlier, to be able to speak, to be able to be willing to hear what people's real thoughts and feelings are is important, right? Without feeling like we have to respond right away. And I think there's a book I read a little while back, and it was honestly about negotiating, but that was one of the techniques that he used was in negotiating, and this guy was a hostage negotiator, so it's like high stakes stuff. Not like your salary or something. But anyway, so he's negotiating like for hostages, and one of the things he found out was that, these people that have taken hostages are afraid, obviously, and have all kinds of they're human too. And if he spoke out what the fears probably were, or what the problems they were facing probably were, that those people ended up
More
like
likely.
calming down a little bit, and they could actually work through some of those problems. But it's actually, and that crosses over just into good relationships in general, is being able to be, as hard as it is, and as many times as it might come back to bite us, honestly, or has come back to bite us before, is trying to find those people that you really do or can build such a relationship with that you can say where you really are and say what you're really going through and say what that really feels like and what you'd really like to do to whatever. And not have it come back as judgment or have it come back as anything else, but have them say, yeah, like I can see, or that, yeah, that's crazy. That sounds really
Well,
hard,
and I think,
you know?
I think also, like you said, I think that every single one of us have felt those feelings at some time.
Yeah.
And you want to have
And
those
I
feelings
think
validated.
everybody on earth has at some point felt those feelings of not being good enough or feeling alone or whatever. And I think that's the big thing is, like you said, just basically coming along beside that person and just, you know, even if you're just say, I'm sorry you're going through this, and sit there with them
Yep.
while they
Yeah.
cry. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry this is happening, you know?
Yeah. Someone on here wrote, I don't want to hear God has a plan. I want to know that I'm not alone.
Yep.
Yeah.
When my grandfather passed away, my friend who lives out in Maine, she called me and left me a voicemail. And she goes, Carrie, I'm here. I'm far away. But if you need me, just call. And we don't even have to talk. We can just sit and cry together on the phone.
Yep.
That was one of the most, I wish I'd taken her up on it. But that was one of the most touching things that's ever, you know. And then another friend of mine texted me around the same time, and I had gotten all these messages from people, oh, he's in a better place, you know, and all these things. But the one that touched me the most was a friend of mine just texted me and said, I love you. And that was it. We just want to know that we're not alone.
Amen.
Yep.
And that we have a safe place to come and talk and share who we are and not be bullied or ridiculed or looked down upon. Because when it's messy, it can get really messy. And I mean, I've told people before, they said, well, why didn't you come to me before everything blew up? Because I didn't want to put my mess out on your desk. I said that to people before. Because it's really scary to put your mess out there.
Yeah.
But the church should be one place where that is definitely true. Those are my examples of when I felt loved the most. Has anyone on here ever felt that too? Just little it doesn't even have to be anything big. It could just be a little thing that when you were in the midst of pain touched you the most.
I think it is just those friends and family members reaching out and letting you know that they are there if you need them. It's like, you know, I'm a phone call away, or I can be there if you need me. Yeah, it's knowing that you're not alone.
Yep.
It's funny because it's not me, but it's Remy, my little 5-year-old grandson. About a month, and this just shows that it happens. It doesn't matter what age you are, what you've seen, what you haven't, you know. So I come home from work one day, and he just come running to me, and he's 5 years old, so he weighs 48 pounds. But so he lifts his arm up, and I pick him up, and he wraps his legs around me, and he lays his head right here on my neck, and he says, "My sweetheart."
He called you his sweetheart?
Because I call him my little sweetheart.
Aw.
And he did. He just laid his head and he said, "My sweetheart." And I said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Did you have a rough day?" And he said, "I did, Mamaw." And all he needed was to lay his little head right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that made me feel loved. And it must have made him feel loved because that's where he came. So if we could just, okay, Charlene, if you could just get, I'll start here first. If I could just get to that point to where I could just go to the people I know who love me and who care and just do that, you know? It's such a easy, hard thing to do.
Yes.
You know, just to be at that point where you can just say, all right, I'm going to put down this wall and I'm going to go to somebody, you know?
I think that, you know, for me, the times that have mattered the most are when people have been willing to slow down what they have going on to check on me.
Yeah.
You know, because again, and it's not just, and I know we know this, but it's not just in church that you walk by people. I do it at work all the time. You walk by people, hey, how you doing today? And people have some
Something
random
going on.
catchphrase that they use, and you're thinking, oh, you say that every day. But to know that somebody doesn't just walk by, but instead they stop, and you know that they've got plenty of other stuff going on too, and that they're busy, and that they have, you know, a whole checklist worth of things that they've got to get done, but that they're willing to slow down enough to actually see me. And I think it's a good reminder for me to try to do that to other people, you know, to try to, because you know, again, we all have plenty of stuff. We live in a very busy time now, and I think the thing that we're not great at doing is slowing down in a lot of respects, but what we miss then is we miss the other people that we're around. And whether we're, you know, working a job, whether we're in school, whether we're wherever, you know,
Right.
there's always something else to do, and there's always people that aren't being seen because nobody's slowing down enough to see them. And it matters a lot to be seen and to be understood and to be just even cared about. And it's amazing to me how much it can show somebody that you care if you're just willing to slow down enough to see them and interact with them in a real way. And I think, you know, when we talk about God, right?
Yep.
That's the concept, right? Is not only is God always, and there's a lot of, well, he's God, he's got all the time in the world, you know, whatever, but still, like, if you're to know that God is there, always slowed down and always wanting to know, and that, you know, at one point, again, he's God, he can kind of do what he wants, right? But he slowed, I would imagine, himself, if we want to say it that way, down enough to come and be here
Yep.
with us. Like, to the point that now I'm just here with you, and that's probably not the pace that God usually works at overall, you know, like, to like a human pace. And so it's interesting to try to model that ourselves to other people.
Yeah. So this is a hard topic, and we probably didn't even scratch the surface of what it looks like in your life or even in our individual lives. But we hopefully have opened up the door for this conversation in the future. If you have never been to church and would like to visit us, you can check out our website and you can see where we are. We would love to hear from you, emails, whatever. If you've battled with this and have had experiences, we want to hopefully, you know, redeem the experience of church to you and hopefully give you a better experience of what open conversation about the hard stuff can really look like through a relationship with God and with the church. So if we would love to hear from you. Again, our website is elivinghope.com. And thank you for joining us tonight. But when we started out tonight, I played a song called Obla Di Obla Da, which is by the Beatles. And the reason I picked it is because recently it's become a happy song for me. And whenever I'm needing something, you know, just need to get out of my head and I'm driving down the road, I'm not going to lie. The song has been on repeat over and over again, and I screamed it at the top of my lungs, singing it out the window. And sometimes at work, it's on repeat in my headphones. It's just a really happy little song, and so we're going to play it on our way out tonight. But thank you all for coming in, for joining on this conversation. Thanks to all the people who were online chatting. John, thank you for being on there hosting for us tonight. Some really great conversation on there. I could see what I could see. Well, I got so enthralled with what we were talking about.
It's a lot to do at
It
once.
is a lot to
It's
do
a lot to do
at
at
once.
once.
John, I don't know how John does it. He does it every week, where he can do both all at the same time. So next week we're going to be here again. We're going to talk more about love. I think next week is why God loves. Maybe I know we're doing who, when, where, why at some point. I think that's next week. But either way, we're going to talk about love next week. So come back and join us at live.elivinghope.com.